Dobry Tuborowski. Anti-Communism is the Trojan horse by which the right has consistently outflanked, endgamed, and too often defeated the left. Moderate leftists, anxious to appear respectable to upper-class parties, to keep their foot in the door, have traditionally played along with red baiting and in the process too often cooperated with reactionary executioners in cutting their own throats. The mantra of the moderate, the reasonable left has been, if there's a conflict between socialism and democracy, choose democracy. This is a complete non sequitur, as the one has always been conceived as the obverse of the other. Scratch the fear of socialism, and underneath you will, without fail, find fear of real democracy. And notice how selectively this equation is applied. The moderate, reasonable left never tells us, in the case of conflict between capitalism and democracy, to choose democracy. There's a conflict of interest between nationalism and patriotism, or democracy, to choose the latter. In most cases, we find the reasonable, moderate socialists allied with capitalists and nationalists in the name of democracy, siding with them as they crush any attempt at fundamental social transformation that would truly empower ordinary people, preserving institutions that have proven themselves unreformable and unamenable to the common good or responsible to the citizens they rule. The reasonable, moderate left has a monolithic, one-dimensional interpretation of democracy that, invariably, can embrace billionaires but not employees' councils, can break sea rations with imperial generals, urge them on to bomb for democracy, yes, I mean the likes of the late Christopher Hitchens or Susan Sontag, yet still feel they're morally superior to Fidel Castro or the Kims of North Korea. Nearly all of the neocon empire lovers started out as leftists, Trotskyists, anarchists, official Communist Party members, what have you, who have seen the light, whatever that is. Noam Chomsky is one of the few to have maintained his integrity as a left non-communist who has not sold out. But Christopher Hitchens, a good example there of someone who led the limelight as a rogue bad boy and finally revolted against even his own career, which seemed to have much to do with his love of the high life. Wine-bibbing at elite clubs is more the lifestyle of the Dick and Bush crowd, so with Hitchens it was just squaring the circle. And there's also David Horowitz, a 60s rebel who's become a quite hateful fanatic reactionary, ready to send Noam Chomsky to a Homeland Security stalag. Allying with the right in the name of fighting Islamofascism seems invariably to turn you into a stereotyped Western fascist and warmonger. But, so, communism has been responsible for millions of victims, for mass atrocities, for suppression of basic freedoms and human rights. Yes, and so has anti-communism, and in even greater depth and breadth. Honest people of the left are well aware of the moral failings on their side. They do not endorse red terrors, blood purges, famines, the conquest of smaller states and weaker peoples. To a large extent, the only reason you know about such things has been due to honest people of the left. Would you ever give Leon Trotsky or Spanish anarchists credit for their denunciation of such things? No. The Western anti-communist consensus has sent its death squads to bump off anarchists or Trotskyists or even social democrats as much as Soviet Marxist-Leninists, claiming to take aim at Stalin in the name of freedom and democracy, yet always seeming to hit everyone but. All the blood purges of trade unionists, Jews, college professors, and students with which the right has littered the streets of its capitals didn't cost Joseph Stalin 1 second of sleep in his Kremlin apartment. The right to this day doesn't discriminate between Wall Street occupiers and armed guerrilla insurgents, between secular humanist college professors and Soviet military commissars. Which brings us to the major dilemma, the fundamental moral and political critique of liberal left anti-communism. Your right-wing allies do not, and basically cannot, distinguish between you and Stalin. To them, everyone on the left comes out of the same basket. Ronald Reagan may have delivered broadsides at the evil empire, but he was taking point-blank aim at the domestic social contract for poor and working Americans, at their right to unionize. When Iron Lady Margaret Thatcher intoned, "Crush the left," she meant demolish public housing as well as the East German Stasi. Those cowardly leftists, laborites, social democrats, and whatnots who sided with Reagan or Thatcher in the name of democratic consensus have always failed to understand, to grasp this essential truth. The Reds today, themselves tomorrow. After the reactionaries, phalangists, libertarians, and chambers of commerce have ordered a subservient state to send forth assassins to cut the throats of communists, Marxist-Leninists, and their Soviet-style regimes, they'll come for the moderate, reasonable leftists next. We saw this after the fall of communism. There was no toleration for reform or democratic socialism. Everything built in East Europe after 1944 was to be swept away. The rollback of communism meant a rollback of welfare, entitlements, public funding for education, the arts, the disabled, of government medicine, because as we all know, tax dollars for public broadcasting lead to Pol Pot. Government health care leads to Nazi euthanasia. And the useful fools of the moderate, reasonable left are right on hand to play their fool's part. Do you ever see the right making the same criticisms the left has flagrantly displayed? Do you see their regrets, their self-criticism for General Franco or Pinochet, or even for Joseph McCarthy? Did you see the left hiding Nazi war criminals? Not even hiding them, but allowing them to live the remainder of their lives unmolested as prospering, respected post-war citizens? I see instead post-communist patriotic regimes in East Europe building their statues to Nazi-era collaborators and war criminals. And has the United States ever apologized to the people of El Salvador for its funding and arming of the military death squad regime that slaughtered tens of thousands of its people, no matter how reasonable or moderate their social demands? I don't think so. But you could find plenty of moderate democratic socialists criticizing the Salvadoran left for its Guevarist revolutionary fantasies. Maybe that's why Hitchens turned against the left. Those Salvadoran peasants would rather listen to liberation theologians than a scotch-drinking anti-theist in his New York penthouse, as more relevant in bringing hope to their bitter lives and changing their hard reality. But whose fault is that? But this is nothing new. It's a game played by the moderate left for generations due to fear of real democracy. In 1917, in Russia, the reasonable, moderate left sided with the capitalists and the patriots, and what was its thanks? To be stabbed in the back by the commanding general of the Russian army, Vladimir Kornilov, in August, 2 months before the Bolshevik coup. What saved Russian democracy? A united left. Bolsheviks and Mensheviks alike coming into the streets. The treachery of allying with the right only opened the door to Bolshevism. A year later, in Germany, with the threat of revolution in the air, the German Social Democrats under Ebert and Noske employed right-wing officers in the Freikorps to crush mass protest and demands for fundamental social change in the wake of imperial defeat. And why not? They had consistently endorsed war credits for the German army and navy, so when confronted by mutiny in the streets, mass democracy, Noske gladly told the German generals, "I will be the bloodhound." And blood is right. The right-wing paramilitaries drowned Berlin and Munich in it, supplying the first veterans for the Nazi stormtroops. German social historian Sebastian Haffner long insisted that the failure of German democracy between the wars was directly the result of crushing the German post-war revolution by re-empowering all the old imperial officers, bureaucrats, and war industrialists who tortured, mocked, and neutered democracy in Germany before pushing Adolf Hitler forward to put it out of its misery. Noske, the official executioner of the Spartacists of Wilhelm Liebknecht and Rosa Luxemburg, was subsequently arrested by the Gestapo for involvement in the July 20th plot against Hitler, and is thus regarded as a hero of the democratic anti-Nazi resistance. But moderate, reasonable German social democrats won't be the ones to tell you that he egged on the very thugs and killers who made Hitler possible and his own execution almost a fact. Where does that leave us in a post-Cold War, post-communist world? In the same old leaky boat. The right is still fighting its shadow battle with Mao and Stalin as it destroys public education, Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security, workers' rights, a safe environment, the rights of dissent and privacy, and freedom from war. They say they're aiming at Castro, but their real target is you. So, I'm not advocating you to be pro-Castro or pro-communist, but to recognize the diversion for what it is, a trick by your real opponent, your real enemy, to divide his opposition, you. If you help them, by allowing them to deflect your anger and despair at the mess they've made, if you follow their anti-red, anti-communist tirades, you're only helping them to sharpen that long knife they plan to use on your throat. There was an old revolutionary theorist, not Che or Fidel, neither Mao nor Trotsky, nor Sartre or Gramsci, but a revered American icon named Ben Franklin, who appears on every laundered USC note, who said, "Either we all hang together, or they will hang us separately." So, uh-oh. Who is it this time? Hello? Christopher Hitchens. Didn't take you long to get this number over there, did you? Where exactly is over there? You're not going into that now. You just want to say that it's America that is the embodiment of the global revolution, not old Che Guevara. America's military might will bring liberation and culture to the dark corners of the world in ways that Trotsky could only have dreamed of. Well, that's the kind of thing the democratic reasonable left said in Germany, too, 100 years ago, and look what they finally ended up with. What's the difference between drone planes spying on the public in the name of Homeland Security and totalitarians imposing their ideology on free peoples? Oh, it's because the drones do it for freedom and democracy and human rights.